If you are concerned with hunger, food waste, climate crisis, international economic development, national economic development, national security issues, international security issues, joblessness, they all sit on a Mobius strip. And if you hop in on any one of those, eventually you come to hunger. When you take away food from people, that's the stuff that revolutions are made of. We cannot progress as a nation if we do not make sure that no American goes hungry. It simply cannot exist.
Hey everybody, it's Scott Savlov, and welcome to another edition of The Path Here. And with me, and we were just talking about this, is someone you recognize his face. He is a chef, a TV personality, teacher, author, works on things in a phrase, social justice advocate and a global advocate for helping people. And, you know, when you ask someone like Andrew Zimmern that question, that has a big presence. To me, you know, to take that on is a big responsibility. How did you come to that place?
Great question. My favorite question, my favorite topic. I'd rather talk about this than just about anything. For the first 30 years of my life, I was a horrific human being. I was a user of people and a taker of things. I was self-centered and worse, I was self-centeredness run wild. There was nothing about other people and their needs that interested me at all. And it was both symptomatic and emblematic of my addiction and alcoholism problems. And when I sobered up almost 32 years ago, I didn't know how I would stay sober. And it was explained to me by my mentors in my 12-step program that there were many ways that we do that we stay sober. And one of the ways, one of the three primary ways, there are many ways for all, but one of the three primary ways is to do things for other people, often referred to as service work. And that can be making coffee. It can be driving somebody to a meeting. It can be carrying the message to another alcoholic. It can be done 1,000 different ways. But essentially, it's doing something for someone else. And it changed my life. And at a certain point, around 7-8 years sober, I was dealing with a problem and speaking with my sponsor in that 12-step program. And he said to me, well, why don't you read this paragraph in our main text and call me back. And I did. And the instruction in the text was to do something for another person. And I said, I can't, I'm at work. And he said, right. And I said, what's your point? And he said, you don't just need to do service work for other alcoholics and addicts. You can do service work for anyone. You can go empty out the garbage under someone's desk. You can push in their chair. You can, you know how people used to write, well, at least when I was growing up, if you saw a dirty rear windshield, you would write clean me on it. Like we thought that was a funny joke. Well, what if you went into your car and got a thing of Windex and a rag and cleaned off someone's anonymously and just drove off, right? Doing a good deed for someone else just for doing it. The mental health benefit from doing work for another human being, something that benefits them, especially anonymously, has been the most surprising piece of behavior in the last 30 years of my life. When someone tells me, go to the gym every day for 30 minutes and you'll be in better shape, I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, I don't necessarily do that. I'm just saying that that's a no-brainer, right? We all know that intellectually to be true. When someone says do something for someone else 15, 20 minutes, a half hour every single day, and you'll be happier, your life will be better, and it will take you to places and things that you never imagined. you kind of look at them and you're like, yeah, I kind of see that. That sounds like something religious, and it's not. And it sounds like a spiritual principle, and it kind of is. I like to think of it more as a design for living that really works. And so I started spending more and more time doing service work outside of helping addicts and alcoholics. The first decade that I was sober, it was 100% focused on addicts and alcoholics. So I started doing that, and within a couple of years, I developed a public life. And, TV gave me a massive platform. And I did nothing with that for the first year or two because I didn't know if the platform was temporary or permanent. I mean, most people are not as blessed and as lucky as I am to have, relevance that stretches over a 2-decade period. And, at various years, I do more in the public space, in the entertainment space than another year, but I've been relevant for 20 years. And that gave me a platform that I could seriously do some work with. So it was actually about 15 years ago. I was actually with Jose. He had not created World Central Kitchen yet. He was active in DC at an institution called the DC Central
You're
Kitchen.
talking about Jose Andres, just for clarity. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he's like Cher.
It's Jose.
And I mean, does he need
doesn't need a last name.
The second name? I mean, it's interesting, actually. He's one of my best friends, and I've actually never considered this. But I think sometime in the last 18 months, you now no longer need to use his last name.
Just Jose.
Think about that for a second, Scott, because you know Jose, and I'm not sure. That's a fascinating thing. I'm going to have to text him that and let him know. It'll really annoy him. I enjoy sending him annoying texts at least once a day. So we were both on a television show together. Someone else's. We were both judging an episode of Iron Chef in New York City. And we had some equipment issues. We got out late at like midnight. And sometimes happens. And he said, I want you to come with me. And I said, where? It's Monday night. It's midnight. We've just been on a set for 14 hours. Aren't we going back to the hotel to bed? And he goes, no, I have 3 people I'm meeting with tonight, and I've been putting them off for hours, but I need you to come with me. And I asked him, I said, why do you need me to come with you? And he goes, well, first of all, I don't want to do it alone. So I'm asking you as my friend to come with me. And I said, oh, okay. And then he said, but you're, and by the way, Bizarre Foods had been on for a year or two by that point. And he said to me, you are going to find yourself with a platform that's bigger than you ever imagined. And what are you going to do with it for other people? And I was floored by that. And I said, well, why do you ask me that? And he said, well, I'm trying to figure that out for myself. Well, he was being a lot more active on that issue. And what he was doing was he took meetings. We met with the editor-in-chief of Time Magazine. We met with a Fortune 50 company owning billionaire. We met with another media person who was expert in the hunger space. And we walked back to our hotel at 4 a.m. New York is a great walking city. It was summertime. And we talked in between walking these restaurants, meeting with these people. And I just sat there listening to these incredible human beings we were talking to. I mean, it was like a semester-long college course in how to be effective as a celebrity in getting stuff done, and
which is
so
very
Jose and I, it can be, And so Jose founded World Central Kitchen out of this. I mean, he worked with Robert Egger at DC Central Kitchen and came up with the model of what would become World Central Kitchen. Robert Egger is an incredible Jose's mentor, has been an incredible mentor in my life, and someone who is a guiding force for many of us, especially in the hunger space, where he is a legendary figure. And over the years, I've attached myself to several organizations. I sit on a lot of boards. I'm lucky enough to serve at an international level at a very effective place with some really incredible places. I'm the United Nations World Food Program's Global Ambassador for Waste. I'm the International Rescue Committee's Ambassador for Nutrition. That was founded by Einstein in 1939. Tony Blair's former Foreign Secretary, David Miliband, is our CEO. And so I'm able to work on refugee issues through that incredible organization. I'm on Charlize Theron's advisory board for Africa Outreach project that she runs. I'm going on to the board.
By the way, she's a pretty good golfer and a pretty good actress too.
Yeah, not bad. She's it's funny when you talk about, real stars. I mean, she walks into a room, there's a disturbance in the atmosphere. But the kindness and the love that she has for her friends is incredible. And we met 13 years ago, working on the Electrify Africa campaign, a bunch of us were trying to push this through Congress. Folks of us who had spent time in Africa and seen the problem.
Incredible.
I have worked with, Bono's organizations, both One and Red. I'm on the board of Services for the Underserved in New York to try to help people in my hometown. I'm going on to the board at Giving Kitchen as it goes national, an organization that helps folks in the restaurant business who fall on hard times. I'm the co-founder of the Coalition for Sustainable Aquaculture and the co-founder for the Independent Restaurant Coalition. And I know I'm leaving out a bunch of other stuff too. But the point being is that I spend a lot of time. I just got back from Zambia, making some videos for the United Nations that comes out in the middle of June. On my YouTube channel. So check my YouTube channel. First one drops June 12th. There's so much need in the world. And what I have found is people say to me, well, that's a lot of organizations. How do you maintain effectiveness?
I was going to ask you that exact question.
Believe me, it's the necessary one. I work on the same 2 or 3 issues with each organization. Here's the challenge though. And it is, it's the stump speech that I give. I've talked about this Mobius strip of issues that I've spoken about this at South by Southwest. I've spoken about it at Milken Institute. I speak about this subject everywhere. If you are concerned with hunger, food waste, climate crisis, if you're concerned with international economic development, if you're interested in farming, if you're interested in national economic development, if you're interested in national security issues, if you're interested in international security issues, if you're interested in joblessness, if you're interested in immigration, and I could add about 5, 6 others onto the list, but I know that's a lot of stuff. They all sit on a Mobius strip. And if you hop in on any one of those, because I've talked to people at the Defense Department about international security issues and at the CIA and with our special forces groups. I mean, this is the one that always surprises people. And what have I talked to them about? Hunger. Because if you hop in on any one of those issues, eventually you come to hunger. Hunger and international economic development, those two issues, both have incredible impact on our national security and our international standing in the world, as well as a huge issue for our men and women serving so bravely abroad. And many people are really surprised when they hear that, but the logic stream is pretty easy. Math, music, food, those are our big three social cultural totems. If you take away music and math, you're going to have a problem if you try to take away my music. I'm pretty attached to my music. If you take away my quadratic equation, I may just pat you on the back and say, bon chance. Thank you for alleviating me of that responsibility. But when you take away food from people, that's the stuff that revolutions are made of. That's where blood is in the streets. And so our government, for many reasons, is very interested in that topic. Food crises, at home and abroad, breeds violence, criminality, pushes people past the brink of what is reasonable or lawful. It is one of the many reasons why solving hunger issues globally and in America is not just a need. It's a vital and necessary part of any conversation that involves our future. We cannot progress as a nation if we do not make sure that no American goes hungry. It simply cannot exist. Hunger and homelessness and these other issues that sort of go along with it are a massive financial drain. If you are this is not a red or blue issue or a left or right issue. This is a forward issue. The net positive financial impact on our federal spend total would be net positive. And the reason is we'd save so much money in our health system, in our criminal justice system. I mean, you could just keep going down the list, and people start realizing as the lights come on that if we're spending, federal government, $1.5 trillion a year, if Americans are spending $1.5 trillion a year fighting the big four processed food related diseases, no one ever got sick eating a tomato. It's eating Pop-Tarts that gives you things like diabetes, right? If we could save a third, just conservatively, a third by feeding everyone healthy food, that's $500 billion. And if I told you that feeding Americans would cost about 10% of that figure, I think you would take that every time. Just with the disease model, a $50 billion spend to end hunger in America, right? $17 billion takes care of all children in America. We have the infrastructure for it, right? They're called schools. We have them everywhere. To distribution, we have the distribution points, we have the trucks, we just need to put some equipment and food and real people cooking real food. By the way, we save $450 billion, even if it's just a third of the health-related diseases get solved. Imagine the impacts in other areas with other savings that are impacted by that. Healthy, fed children, their scores go up in school. Their outcomes are statistically better in jobs. Everything. Right. Recidivism. We've done some incredible pilot programs, especially in the state of California in the prison system there. When you take a prison, I'm talking about a federal penitentiary with real hardened criminals. I'm not talking about Danbury or country club jails. I'm talking about real prisons. When you start doing job training for food with inmates, they have something to do when they leave prison and a skill, right? If they are also using that job training system to feed their fellow inmates, everyone in the prison system is healthier. So who pays for healthcare in a prison system? It's paid for with our taxes. Same thing in a public hospital or a public school, right? So you just start doing the math. If we improve food, every single place that intersects with the public dollar, right? senior centers, prisons, other institutions, hospitals, schools, etc. The outcomes are dramatically better for everyone. Studies show, the most recent studies out of Harvard and Pew Charitable Trust show that about recidivism rates go down about 27%. So let's just round to 30. That's almost a third, right? So imagine the reduction of costs state by state in the criminal justice system. We have the most overcrowded jails in the world here in America. We spend a fortune in that part of our budget. You can literally save money everywhere by feeding them. And the best part about the whole thing, it solves another problem for us. We're losing more farmers by about a factor of about 80-1 every year than farmers that are coming into the system. So what that's doing is it's taking farmland and concentrating it in the hands of a few, which means processed food and farm to freighter food. If we're actually regionally around the lower 48, Alaska and Hawaii, able to use fish off the coast of Alaska and Hawaii, fertile soil in the lower 48, where we have lots of arable land, and we're able to incentivize farmers to stay in business because they have a new client called the U.S. government. Imagine what that does to the economics of farming here in this country. And eventually you bump into immigration, right? It would spur, if you do those other things, finally, I mean, we've kicked immigration reform down the road, I think, for the last 7 administrations. Again, not red or blue or left or right. I'm just about forward, right? Someone has to tackle this problem. You bump into it everywhere. So I am so privileged to be a human being that gets to actually talk and work on these issues and make some positive change for the world, whether it's in Zatari refugee camp on the Syrian border with Jordan, whether it's in Zambia with my work with the United Nations World Food Program, whether it is in all of Southern Africa with the pilot programs and other established programs we support through CTAOP, whether it is with finding jobs and food industry jobs for those that need them at Services for the Underserved in New York. Everywhere I go, it's the same issue. It just depends on where in the Mobius strip you want to jump in. People often ask, well, why is it that chefs seem to be doing this? I mean, they look at people like Jose Andres, Tom Colicchio, Chris Shepard, Southern Smoke Foundation, Ed Lee with the Lee Initiative, young entrepreneurs like Spike Mendelsohn, who people know from Top Chef and some of his DC-based restaurants, but who does a ton in this space as well. I could just keep naming huge groups of culinarians who are involved in this kind of work, and they work very, very, very hard on it. And the reason is that as chefs working in restaurants, as we all did at one point, you are literally bombarded by health insurance, pay equity, gender equity, farming, climate crisis, hunger, food waste issues every day. You're confronted by all of it every day, and you're a small business owner, right? So the amount of learning that you get as a chef owner in a restaurant, I would argue, makes you the most viable candidate to help with this kind of work. And so I think you'll see over the next generation more and more culinarians turning to this. I think inspired by people like Jose, and the work that a lot of us are doing, I hope, leaves a legacy of inspiration that creates real solutions over the next coming few decades.
What you just talked about so eloquently in a descriptive is taking all this knowledge that you've had over your esteemed life and translate that into what you've learned to maybe solve issues or help solve issues. But if you went back and you looked at it, if you said to me, Scott, let me describe my childhood for you in a quick blurb, how would you describe Andrew Zimmern's childhood?
Privileged but tortured. There was I had it better than most. I mean, I was born in a house that by today's standards would be considered one percenters. And I had a wonderful childhood growing up in many ways and was afforded many opportunities, the best schools, the best relationships offered to them. Had I been paying better attention, I probably would have avoided a lot of the pitfalls in my life that I did, but I didn't pay attention because there was something inside of me that, was more concerned with me than other people. And that bloomed into full-blown addiction and alcoholism, as is typically the case with that. At what age? That kind of issue.
And again,
I started when I was about 13, but we also endured. There were also some impacts on my life that also pushed me in that direction. I had to make the choice to pick up rather than talk to another human being or solve my problem a different way. I thought I would solve my problem in a bottle. That was a very large mistake. There is no solution in a bottle. There's only jails, institutions, and death in a bottle. The secret to solving problems in life is other people. I just had I'll digress for a second. I just had a meeting in my office yesterday, informal, with two people that run two different businesses that I own, that turned into a sharing crying session. And they came to me because they were concerned about my busyness and some other issues and things in my life. And it was just friends talking to friends, right? The healing that comes from that, where you actually have a real conversation with real human beings and everyone gets vulnerable with each other,
right,
that solves problems. I actually solved, well, let me be more accurate. I had inklings about how I was going to solve certain problems, but that solidified and cemented how I was going to solve those problems by sharing with other human beings. We often find that's the case. We have a problem in our life. We actually go on a walk with someone. We share it with, a spouse, a business colleague, a friend, or maybe we're on the golf course. It's why I love sports, because you get to talk to your buddies, and occasionally someone actually shares something real. And then 3 or 4 other people. I don't know if you watch Ted Lasso, but there's the dog whistle goes out. And, they convene to actually solve an emotional issue. And there's real vulnerability. It's my favorite part of that show. And people always ask me, well, why? I said, because if everyone did that in every workplace, everywhere, we kind of did that yesterday in my office. It was very, very healing. There's no solution in a bottle. But I did have some traumatic events as a child that, I've been working on for a long time. It's part of, once you've been physically sober for a long time, you move into emotional sobriety and some behavioral sobriety and other things like that allow you to be the best version of yourself that can be. New York gave me the greatest gifts in the world. It's the most exciting city in the world. It's the best city in the world. There's no city in the world like New York. Full stop. Sorry, rest of the world.
Right.
I'm one of those people who's actually been everywhere and can say, yep, been there.
Yeah.
I put my travel career up against anyone's. New York's the best place on planet Earth. I learned more there. I learned how to be smart. I learned how to navigate. I learned how to think critically. I learned speed and sense of urgency. I learned how to spot trouble. I learned street sense. I learned a ton of things in New York. My addiction to alcoholism taking place in New York almost killed me. I came to Minnesota, and the kindness and the love and the patience and the slower pace of the Midwest loved me up and healed me at a time I needed to be loved up and healed.
Right.
Minneapolis in 2023 is way different than Minneapolis in January of 1992 when I arrived here.
Right.
Minneapolis is now a bustling urban environment with a ton to offer. It's not New York. I mean, no one is ever going to tell you that the Twin Cities are New York. But when I got here, it was very different, and it was exactly what I needed. And I've been living here ever since, lovingly. And I consider myself bi-coastal. The Midwest and New York are my homes. You can't take the New Yorker out of a New Yorker. I ask, there's several people in my life that I ask all the time, is this the year I become a Minnesotan? And they all say, no, you still talk too fast and swear too much. But when those things happen, you've checked every other box. And it's just, I sadly think that's out of the question.
By the way, you had to be, you're discounting shit. You had to be pretty smart. You went to Vassar, right? And that selection process, that's kind of one of those, I think I have a classmate of yours as a friend. I don't know if you remember the name John Rizzi.
Of course I do.
John Rizzi co-authored a culinary book with me.
That's fantastic. Say hi to him for me.
I will do that. But Vassar,
I will say
again,
Vassar
is a...
But Vassar of 1979, which was the year I started there, was much different. Yes, it was not easy to get into. I over-applied to a lot of places thinking I'm for sure getting into my top 3. I did not get into my top 3, and I got waitlisted at several of my other schools. And then I got in to a couple schools that were my safeties that at the end of the day, I just didn't really want to go to.
Right.
And, the college advisors always say, even when it comes to safety schools, don't ever apply to a place you wouldn't go. Did I listen?
No.
Not at all. Did I listen to them when they said, you're a good student and you got a good resume in terms of your non-academic interests and stuff like that.
Extracurricular.
Extracurricular activities. And clearly you're smart because your SAT and ACT scores are really high. But that makes a lot of people suspicious about why the occasional bad grade that pops up, once a year somewhere in their transcript. And it was really because I was already a full-blown addict and I was into girls and drugs and sports. Then the sports went away and it was just girls and drugs. And then the girls went, it was just drugs and alcohol. And I'm not proud of it. It's just the way it was. Vassar really wanted and needed men. They were at a transition point. They had just started allowing men to matriculate there. For 150 years, it was a women's college.
Yeah.
And I think I was the 6th class of men. I think they started letting men in 74 or 75, something like that. And so,
if you
when I got
women,
there,
that was a good place to go.
Well, I liked the school and it had such great history and art history departments. And that's what I wanted to study. And because I didn't apply to Vassar until I already was out of all the other, luckily my college advisor knew some people up there and said, take the next 3 days, write this, and they'll consider your application. I wound up getting in and I went there. And I had never visited. And I got up there and I was like, wow, did I make the right choice? I probably should have taken a gap year. That really did exist when I was younger. And that would have been really important for me. I wasn't ready for school when school was ready for me. So there's that. But it's, I studied art history and history. I got a double degree. Vassar was an incredible experience. I love that college. And I think it certainly helped me as well. Excellent school. I mean, the academics there are very rigorous, really excellent school. And I learned how to read, write, and think critically. And actually, if it wasn't for my art history 101 teacher, Bizarre Foods, would not exist. Madame Koretsky, who taught, the members of the art history department rotate teaching the 101 courses.
Right.
And there was art history 101, which was, a cakewalk class if you weren't going to be an art history or history major. But if you wanted it to count towards your major, they put you in 101B or whatever, 101 asterisk. And that was really what we were considering a major. And it was a very difficult introductory course. And the very first day, Madame Koretsky walked in, and there's 200 people. It's all beautiful art history auditorium, the tiny lamp on everyone's desk. I mean, one of the benefits of going to a 150-year-old school are these incredible rooms there. And she put a slide up of Northern European painting. There was a woman. She was standing next to a table. There's a bowl of fruit. There's a window. Outside the window, you can see some stuff on the water. Looked like boats. There was a dog on the floor. There was a chair. There was nothing else in the room, nothing else on the painting. And she said, I want everyone to take 5 minutes, write down everything you see. And everyone wrote, and, like a wise ass, I raised my hand, first. I got called on, and I rattled off what was obvious. She said, what does it tell you? And I was silent. I was like, attractive woman, I don't know, waiting to be married, whatever. And she took a couple answers from the classroom. No one else had anything to add. We were all sort of stymied by her question. And kind of like the last 5 pages of an Agatha Christie book where, Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple or any one of his other detective heroes literally solves the locked door murder mystery like Sherlock Holmes did, where the reveal at the end, where it's just like, how did you see that? She pointed out, this is extreme. You're talking 16th century Holland, right? The clothes, the jewelry. No one noticed the pearls around her neck. She's wealthy. The boats outside on the water indicate what job her father is a trader, owns those boats. Otherwise, that would not be the view out the window. If he was a winemaker, it would be vineyards, right? It's boats. Her father owns the boats. That puts him in the top 1%ers in 16th century, what is now Holland. Fruit on the table. Anybody notice what was in the bowl? You just said fruit. One of the fruits, there was a banana. Who has bananas in Holland? Only someone who has boats that can come back from someplace tropical,
right,
with trees at the right time of year and harvest them that was one of the rare. Can you imagine how rare a banana is in 16th century Northern Europe?
Yeah.
It's insane. And she started to, through this, she deduced what was going on here. This was a man showing his father pays for it. It's a patriarchal society. It's the 16th century, right? This is not 21st century America. He is literally proud of his daughter. Notice she's underdeveloped physically.
Right.
She's not a woman. She's a girl. This is an advertisement for a man to sell his daughter into wedlock, to make a match. And he just keeps going on and on and on, or she kept going. And I was like, my God, she looks at a painting and she can tell everything about that culture just by looking at one bleeping painting.
Yeah.
30 years later, 27 years later, whatever it is, I looked at a bowl of stew in a jungle market in the wilds of Nicaragua and did the same thing in a episode of Bizarre Foods, where I challenged the viewer and I just says, what does this bowl of food tell you about this culture?
Wow.
And it looked like just kind of like a blechi stew. I mean, it wasn't restaurant food. It was peasant food in the jungle.
Obviously.
And I sat there and I started to describe what I saw in there. And it was one of my favorite moments in the history of the show. And it just came out of me. And I realized, oh my God, that's Madame Koretsky speaking through me. It's you should be able to look at a bowl of food or plate of food and tell something about a culture. And so that was, in an ad hoc way, the genesis for Bizarre Foods was, let's tell stories about culture through food.
Right.
Now, a lot of people in the years who have copycatted shows like mine, shows like Tony's that started this trend, oh yeah, we're going to tell stories about culture through food, and the stories have to be great and all the rest of that. And I, it's like, good luck. It's not easy.
Or telling a news story about it is not easy.
Well, it doesn't even need to be new. Yes. Am I irritated when I see a lot of people showing up at the same restaurants that I covered, like really specific stuff? Sure. But there are some chefs and restaurants and cities and places that deserve to have stories told over and over and over and over again. And there are shows like Somebody Feed Phil or Padma Lakshmi's Taste the Nation and some other shows that I think do a really good job of it. But there's 100 others that don't. It's very, very tricky. And you have to have a lot, Phil has a lot of experience and he's a very smart person. Padma has a lot of experience. She's a very smart person. You have to be able to carry that water, right? And if you can't carry that water, it's an issue.
For you, you're, again, New York, Minnesota, you're embracing different cultures. You have a very diversified background of overcoming the obstacle of alcoholism and dependency. Where did you come up with Bizarre Foods, and was it cathartic for you to then do the pilot and put that out there?
Yeah. I was pitching TV shows continuously for 3-4 years. I knew I needed a larger audience for my stories. And one thing led to another. And I found myself pitching a show to Food Network called The Wandering Spoon. It's a horrible show. Terrible name. And but I got some great advice from a young executive there. And I went back and I sort of honed things up and I studied more. And I realized that people were telling stories about food standing behind a cooktop and then chopping and making a dish. I said, what about going out on the road, right? I mean, nothing else had existed that married the two. There were in-studio shows about food. There were travel shows about travel, like Rick Steves. Yeah, did he go into a restaurant or a pub or whatever occasionally? Sure. But he never explored food until food became a big deal. I'm talking about in recent years. Tony, meanwhile, was doing the same thing that I was. We were sort of creating in secret, right? I mean, no one creates in public. He was about to embark on doing a Cook's Tour, which is a Food Network show that was there for a year before it moved over to Travel Channel and turned into No Reservations, and the rest was history. And then became Parts Unknown on CNN. Same show, right? I have many shows that, come off as different because the network had to Travel Channel wanted to rename them so they got some more publicity. Right. But whether it's Bizarre Foods America, Bizarre World, Delicious Destinations, I get it. It's a companion show, green screen, half an hour, easily digestible, but it's all the same show, right? I mean, I do one kind of show other than the occasional one-off. I did All-Star Academy for Food Network. I did, the recent show for Netflix, their version of Iron Chef. I did What's Eating America for MSNBC, the show I'm proudest of to this date. I'm doing, Wild Game Kitchen for the Outdoor Channel.
Nice.
And Family Dinner for Magnolia currently. Very proud of those shows. They're great television. But I wanted to do a different kind of story, traveling, and I wanted to tell the stories that people weren't telling. So that meant stories from the fringe.
Right.
Hence Bizarre Foods, right? It's not about chicken breast. We're going to go eat, iguana in a place where they eat iguanas. And what does that say about a place? That says a lot about a place. It was incredible. And then we made Bizarre Foods, and it wound up being a big hit for a whole variety of reasons, and has become one of those legacy shows that I was lucky too. I chose not to be on Food Network. At one point, I got an offer from them for a show, and I realized I would be on Saturday morning at 7 a.m. and I'd be one of 50.
Right.
If I was the food guy on Travel Channel, I'd be one of one.
Right.
At that point, when I had the Tony show had just premiered Cook's Tour on Food Network, and mine was in the can getting ready to premiere the next year. They wound up putting us both on the same night, and it wound up working really, really well for Travel Channel for a decade. They wound up splitting us so we could each lead our own night, but it really launched Travel Channel into the stratosphere. They only had one hit show that was like, and then Tony show, and then the following year, my show being added sort of catapulted Travel Channel into a different category. But I was just very lucky and very blessed. Then the platform brings us full circle. The platform gave rise to me being able to do some good in the world. So,
well, my last question for you, if there wasn't culinary, if there wasn't the ability for you to use your training to either help people or to create television shows, what would Andrew Zimmern be doing?
I'd either be in politics or teaching art history somewhere.
Art history, I see. Politics would be that's probably over another show, because I imagine you have your opinions, which I've greatly appreciated, mind you. I think that would be fascinating to hear your perspective on it.
I believe in people, and I'm a student of history, and I believe in citizen representation. And I think that, and again, this is civic. It's not left or right. It's not red or blue. Yes. Each side can look at other people and say, we have people. I don't believe in professional politicians. I think we should have people like you and me going and representing our districts for 8, 12 years max and getting out. Imagine the benefits that would have if you actually had real human beings deciding these things with the right term limits, which would take all the big money out of it, or a lot of the big money out of it. It seems like a really simple proposition. And quite honestly, I've been very public about this. And, at a certain point, do I want to deal with running for office today? Absolutely not. But in 5 years, would I be the mayor of the tiny little town that I live in Minnesota? Would I be on the city council of the larger district? Would I try to serve my community in the best way I know how at some point? Of course I would. I think that would be a great thing to do for the third chapter in my professional career. Why not? Why wouldn't I?
All I want to do, candidly, is figure out in the town of Encinitas where I live, how am I going to get them to pave my streets?
Yeah.
I need my 3 minutes.
Yep.
See that? Everybody has to find that way. I walk my dog.
I've got
and I need to pave the streets.
I got a pretty good track record on putting things across the finish line, both here in the Minnesota State House and in Washington, D.C. So, my advisors have all told me you can get as much accomplished on the sidelines as you can holding office. And they're right. As long as I'm effective, as long as I'm helping other people, at the end of the day, that's the only, I break out into rashes of selfishness at times in my life that always cause problems.
Everybody
right?
does
sometimes,
that.
No, 100%. That's a human truth.
Yep.
I'm just lucky that I have another part of my life where I get to see the road straighten out and get the car under control.
Well, Senator Zimmern, thank you for joining us on the path here. I look forward to seeing you in person, and
likewise, my friend.
And I totally enjoyed hearing, when people think about how you described culinary and actually feeding people. I think that you're descriptive of feeding people is probably your greatest gift that we have right now. And we need that more. We need that definition you gave us earlier on this episode, more
100%.
and more to help people, period.
100%. 100%.
Andrew, thank you so much. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to write us on thepathhere.com to have one of your questions featured on a future episode. You can follow me on Instagram @ScottSavlo. If you want to send us a tweet or follow us on Instagram, it's @thepathhere podcast. Hey, I'm Scott Savlov, and you've been listening to The Path Here.